Hi.
Manager at the Connecticut's Women's Hall of Fame, and she will be our moderator for today's discussion. You may also ask questions in the chat room and on Facebook Live throughout the program. So we'll just make sure that, I just want to make sure that everyone is muted during the program, and then you can post your questions in the chat room and also, again, on Facebook Live. So at this point, I'm going to turn the program over to our moderator for the conversation, Liz Cribbs.
Thank you, Robert. I'm very honored to be with all of you today, moderating this interview with Deborah, Schander, and Lizette Pelletier. So let's get started. So I'd love to hear from both of you. How did you become interested in the library and archival professions? Deborah, would you like to start?
Sure, thank you very much. And thank you to Robert and Christine and Liz for coordinating this program and moderating. We have been looking forward to it. So I came to librarianship through a very roundabout way. I was always a reader, but it was just something that I did for fun. And I was very set on going into journalism as my career. I had it all planned out. And I started going through my studies and I realized, you know what, actually, this isn't something that I want to spend the rest of my life doing after all. And I felt like I wasn't sure what to do instead. And luckily, I wound up taking a communications law class in college as part of my program. And I realized how much I enjoyed it. I love the study of law. I love the cases that we were reading and the information about it and intellectual property problems and concerns. And so I decided to pivot to law school. But I also knew that even when I was going into law school that at the time, I've always been very introverted. I am not somebody who enjoyed being up in front of groups of people. And so I thought, well, what do I want to do if I don't want to actually go in front of a courtroom and practice law? And luckily, I connected with the law library director at my school who said, well, you know, we have a joint degree program. You could become a law librarian. And I looked into it. I actually was the first person to go through the program at my school as a joint degree program. And I loved it. It let me continue to work in areas that I enjoyed, but it also allowed me to keep my options open in terms of being interested in intellectual property, in legal history, in foreign and international law. And so it allowed me to be a little bit of a magpie, but still work in the areas that I was in. And so that was just my very quick kind of path toward, or my long path to librarianship. But looking back, it was exciting. And the one thing I would say is throughout the course of all of this, my mom, who is with us today, she was a K-12 principal and teacher, and she kept saying, well, maybe you should get an education degree. You might teach someday. And I said, Mom, I'm not going to do that. I don't need to do that. And then, of course, I was in the classroom for almost 15 years. So the lesson in this is always listen to your mother. That's what I would say.
Thank you, Deborah. And Lizette?
Yeah, I started out being interested in going into law. When I graduated, I'm at the tail end of the baby boomer cohort. And so when, my father was really encouraging me to go into labor law and work for unions because our family had been involved in unions. And, but I can't remember if it was the spring of my senior year in high school or the fall of my freshman year, but there were so many people going to law school that had actually made a Time magazine cover about all these people going into law school, and that there was going to be 4, I think, people for every single law position out there. And I said, well, I'm not going to go to school and spend all this time and money and not have a job. So I didn't know what would I do. I enjoyed history. And so as I was doing undergraduate work in history, my family took a summer vacation, came out here to the East Coast. I'm originally from Minnesota. I have an aunt that lives here in Connecticut. One of my cousins was graduating from high school. And so we did the East Coast history tour. Of course, it was still in the bicentennial year celebration. I know I'm dating myself, but that's the way it is. And You know, so we did Gettysburg and we did the Smithsonian in DC. My dad's youngest sister lived outside of DC. And we went to the National Archives. And of course, this is back before everything was all high security. And I asked one of the guards, like, how do you get a job here? And they actually went out and found an archivist for me to talk to. And so I learned about what you needed to do to get into the archives. That they happened to mention that they did internships. And so after I graduated with my degree in history, I wrote a letter to the National Archives, got an internship at the National Historic Publications and Records Commission, which is their grant-making body, and did an internship out there. I was not doing processing, however. I was working on a directory of archives and records manuscripts collections across the United States, which was supposed to be the nuck-muck of archives. And then learned about the program at the University of Maryland in College Park, which was a joint degree in history and library science. Applied, got in. They had a specialization in archives and records management. And after a few fits and starts, ended up back here in Connecticut on my first job, which was funded by the NHPRC, and then ended up getting a job here at the State Library. So that's how I got into archives and have been loving it ever since.
Wow, that's so exciting. So interesting, both of your paths. So here's a great question for both of you. What qualities do you feel are essential for a successful career in your profession, and why? Lizette?
Well, you don't have to be a historian. You don't have to be that. You just have to be curious and inquisitive. I think you need to be able, you need to be flexible, because you move around between a whole bunch of different things. I know people think that, have this stereotype of, an archivist, if they even think about it, know what an archivist is. Oh, you're an archaeologist? No, I'm an archivist. I work with old documents. Well, and not necessarily old documents either. I'm perpetuating the own stereotype, but you have to be able to switch gears a lot. You have to be willing to learn new skills, and you have to be a good communicator. I think you have to be able to write and communicate, and be willing to talk about what you do and relay that information. So I think those are some of the strong skills I think you need as an archivist.
Great. And Deborah?
I would absolutely agree with that. I think to be a successful librarian, you need that curiosity. You need to be interested in a wide range of things, no matter how specialized the work that you do or specialized the library that you are in, you're still going to get questions on all kinds of topics. And you need to be, even if you're not specifically interested in what you've been asked to help answer, you need to have the curiosity and the willingness to go forward and help somebody find the answer to the question that they're asking. And so I think that, as Lizette said, curiosity is incredibly important. And also to communication. Certainly as I've moved into the administrative side of library work, it's incredibly important to be able to not only make decisions, but also to be able to communicate those out in ways that help people understand why you're doing what you're doing, why you're making the decisions that you are. Unfortunately, particularly in a position like this, there are so many people who are stakeholders interested in the work that you're doing, and you can't make everybody happy all the time. And you need to be able to share. I think that one way to move forward in that is being able to share your reasoning, why you're doing what you're doing, listening to people, hearing their concerns, making people feel like they are part of the conversation and have a say in what you're doing, but also knowing that not everybody's going to be happy with everything that you do, and being okay with that and learning to respond to it. So curiosity, good communication, transparency, and then also just fortitude to continue on to.
Those are,
and not an expectation of making a lot of money.
Also that, yeah.
That's very funny. So Deborah, the State Library has been closed to the public due to the pandemic for over a year. When do you think the state library will open?
I think that's a really great question. And I have actually been having a number of conversations about that recently. We are very conscious of the fact that we have been closed, and all of the people who are hoping to get back into our facilities soon and continue their research. So we are working toward a reopening date. Hopefully we'll have some information on that soon. I've been meeting with our partners over at the judicial side, since we share a facility with the Supreme Court, meeting with the marshals, other people who would be concerned with it. And we want to make sure we're doing it in a safe way, obviously, for our visitors and for our staff. But hopefully we will have some more information about that for you all soon.
Great, thank you. I'm sure people are really wondering when things are going. So, Lizette, what is one project that you worked on in the state archives that you are particularly proud of?
Well, of course, there's a lot of them, but I think the one that really stands out for me is we have done a joint project with the Connecticut Radio Information System, which is an organization that provides recordings of printed material for people who are either blind, legally blind, or have a reading disability. It's located in Enfield, and members of our staff had been going out to the community and collecting information about the centennial of or centenary commemoration of World War I. And we were approached by Chris Radio if we'd be interested in doing a project to do recordings of historical documents. So we took advantage of this whole new collection of materials that we had gathered and went through, picked correspondence, diaries, as well as newspaper articles, publications that had to do with World War I, Connecticut and World War I. We created transcripts for them, and they were recorded. They're available through the Chris Radio's website. And so people who cannot read or come to the archives and, you know, actually look at documents, or even have trouble online doing that, were able to hear this recording done. So they match the voice. So if something was written by a male, it was read with a male voice. If it was a female, it was read with a female voice. It was read in a natural cadence, you know, that somebody would really speak as. And it was just astonishing, the amount of information hits to the website. We've since learned that teachers are very interested in that in the classrooms with the history teachers, because they can incorporate it and it makes history come alive for their students. So we're benefiting both the visually and reading disabled, as well as anyone in the community. And so we've moved forward with another project. We did some recordings in partnership with the Connecticut Historical Society, Watkins Library at Trinity, and the Hartford History Room at Hartford Public Library to do materials on suffrage. And so there's some of those materials are now being posted and put up as well. And, you know, we're hoping to do some other projects with them. And I think that's because we've reached out to a whole new audience that we hadn't been able to reach before. So, and it's increased the value of our collections.
That's great. Well, that was my next question, so thank you. So what do you think the role could be for the state library and the state archives to play in researching underdocumented BIPOC communities in Connecticut? Lizette.
Well, again, this idea of partnership, because we're primarily the archives for the state of Connecticut, but early on in our history, George S. Goddard, who was, I think he was the third state librarian, but he was the one who got this building built that we're in. And he was very interested in collecting and bringing together materials having to do with Connecticut. And so we do have a wide range of non-governmental archival material. But we have to recognize that it reflects George's values, because George was the one going out to collect the material. But there are very, very interesting things in there. Right now, we are doing a federally funded grant project to go through the New Haven County court records from the early 1600s through 1855 to identify materials in cases in those collections that have to do with Black and Indigenous and what's called the BIPOC community. That's one of the focuses, to create an index, a name index, a case index. Of course, we have to be sensitive because that material reflects, again, the time period was. There's a lot of terminology that today would be considered racist, offensive. So, I mean, the way we describe and catalog, well, we don't catalog, but our finding aids and how we present that through social media. I mean, we have to make people aware that this is some of the things that we're going to see, but we're opening, again, this material up and making it more identifiable. It's not hidden history anymore. But then in partnership with other organizations in Connecticut, the Historical Society, like, we've been doing, and we have the opportunity, the University of Connecticut has the Connecticut Digital Archives that is participants from different organizations across the state. So there's ways that we can link all this information by topic and make it available. So collaboration and just identifying that there's a need for this material.
That is very fascinating and wonderful. Just the amount of resources that are out there to help research, these different areas. So here's a question from Stephen through Facebook. What is, for Deborah, what are you most excited about in terms of the move to Connecticut, and what impact do they want to make as the incoming 11th state librarian?
I think that is a great question. So thank you, Steve. I moved to Connecticut at the end of the last year. I started the state library in January. And I think one of the things that I want to do, of course, is continue on the work of the previous state librarians. It is a good history of the gentlemen who have been in this position and the work that they have done. When you think about the fact that in the whole history of our state, of the colony, there have only been 11 state librarians in this entire time, is impressive, because it tells you that people come into this position, they stay, they're invested in the job, they're invested in the state. And I'm looking forward to continuing on with that. In terms of what I am looking forward to, I think it kind of continues on with what Lizette was saying just a second ago. There are so many opportunities to showcase Connecticut history, various voices that maybe have been underrepresented in the past, to collect the history of Connecticut, to share it, not only with people who are interested in historical research or scholarly research, but students in particular. I'm excited to be able to provide these resources to students to get them to understand the work that we do, the collections that we have. And then, from my personal standpoint, I get to sit in meetings with Lizette and with the director of public records and our history and genealogy department and other people, and they come to me and say, we have this wonderful idea. We have this grant that we want to pursue. We want to do this thing with our time and our resources. And I get to say, yes, let's do it. And so I think that I just want to continue to expand and grow the work that we have been providing, and increase awareness of what we do. I think that it can be very easy to say, oh, the Connecticut State Library, it's a library, it's an archives, but I think people don't really know the wealth of resources that we have and the materials that we have. And so looking at our collection, making sure that they're accessible, what can we do to digitize them? What can we do to promote them? What do we have that we don't even really know about yet? And continuing to explore that. So those are some of the things that I'm excited about.
Great. And what do you think the state library feels will be the biggest challenges in Connecticut in the future?
Oh, so the biggest challenge in the library community moving forward, is that the question?
Mhm.
That is a great question. So I think a couple of things. Obviously, COVID, I think, has thrown everybody for a loop. We've been closed. We've been having to change the way that we are providing research or delay the research that we're able to provide to people. And we're not sure what that will look like when we come back. I think that there's going to be a greater emphasis on, like I said, virtual programs, digital resources, all of those kinds of things. I think that as much as we talk about Zoom fatigue and everybody wanting to get off their screens, I think people have also seen the advantage of it and the fact that people from at the same time and share programming. We don't have to arrange a whole day to get together and talk about some of these issues. And so I think that libraries, archives, a lot of different organizations are going to have to learn to balance that approach to the work that we do moving forward. And then it's, I think as we've discussed just earlier, it's a question of not just looking at the historical research that we've been doing and the voices that we have been telling their stories and the collections that we've had in the past, but what are we missing? What has slipped through the cracks? And how do we bring that to the forefront as well? I think those are just a couple of the things that libraries are going to be thinking about in the near future.
Great. So you have been at the State Library for almost 3 months now. What has been the most unexpected thing that you have learned about the agency?
I think probably I would just say every day is expect the unexpected. It is, I look at my calendar in the morning and I think I know what my day is going to be like, and it goes off in a completely different direction. But that's what's really great about this job. It's an adventure. It's an opportunity to share and learn so many different things. And I know when I came in, I didn't really know the scope of the work of what the library can do. You can only learn so much by looking at a website and having a couple of conversations with people. And so learning about all of these different projects and the work that, like I've said, Lizette comes in with, that Christine is coming in with, Robert, others that they say, hey, did you know that we do this project? We have this grant in the offing. Here's something that we are providing to this group of people. And it is wonderful to hear about all of those things. And so I have been enjoying, it's been a pleasant surprise. I don't think it's an unexpected or a bad surprise. It's been really wonderful to hear about that. And I think that that is, again, something that I would like to share out, because I think that a lot of the public is unaware of some of the work that we do too, or just a narrow focus. And so continuing to share that out, I think, is really important.
Great. Yes, I do agree. And Lizette, can you describe what is going to be done with the 1662 Connecticut Charter that is currently displayed in the Museum of Connecticut History?
Yes, so we are hoping that once everything settles down and gets more back to normal, to be able to send the charter to have it conserved. I think it's been about 40 years since it was last looked at by trained conservators. It's on, I believe, vellum, which is an animal skin, in ink. So it's in a case in the museum in a vault that can be closed, but it should be taken out and examined every so often. So as soon as we can get through all the bureaucracy that comes with doing projects like this, yes, we hope to be able to have it taken to a conservation lab, examined, treated, and made sure that it's going to last for another almost 400 years. But yes, they do need to be looked at every so often. It's been closed up in the vault since last March because the museum's been closed. So it's been in a nice dark, a relatively stable environment, which is really good for it. But if when we want to be able to display it and make it available to the public.
Mhm. Great. And just kind of tagging on that as well, the library, the Connecticut State Library, has a wide range of historical books and other documents to offer patrons for their research needs. Some of these materials may contain language that may be considered offensive or even racist in today's social climate. So how do you balance the preservation of such materials against today's more inclusive society? I think it's a very timely question. Lizette, what do you think?
Well, history is what history is. Events happen, people are involved in it, and it needs to be documented. But we do have to be sensitive in the way that we described it. The records were created, so government records are created by those who govern and are from that perspective. And government is not always wise and good. It can be harmful to people, and the records reflect that. We have to balance the right to information, to understand. I mean, we're a democracy, so having those records that tell the truthful story of the way our society and our government has operated is very important. But we can describe that in a sensitive way. We can let people know that you're going to see things in these records that could be disturbing because our values as a society have changed. But we also, we can't remove things from the collection because they're disturbing, because they explain why things happened the way they happened, and they give context to actions that people took. So it has to be a balance for people. We can have debates on the terms we use and so forth, but if we're going to be an inclusive society, we have to be respectful of everybody in that society. And so, I hope that, and I see this in the profession as well, the younger people that are coming into it are very sensitive to this need and to how these things are addressed. And so I think it's a good thing that's happening. But we're not going to remove stuff because it's offensive. But we it will be available, but we will let people know that at this point in time it's considered offensive, and you may find that. So if it bothers you, then you have a choice to look at it or not look at it.
Mhm. Great, thank you. And I do agree, the next generation is definitely more, they're looking at it from a different perspective, so which is very helpful for all of, for everything going forward. So Deborah, as the head of a state agency, what have you learned from meeting with the governor and legislators?
I think that I have not gotten to meet the governor yet, unfortunately, but I'm sure it will happen. But I think one of the things I've learned is just the importance of communication, the importance of building relationships. I was in another meeting yesterday and I said something very similar to this. By library standards, we're pretty big. By state agency standards, we're really small. And so one of the things is understanding the scope of the state library within the entire structure of the state government, how many people are working on different projects that may or may not intersect with the work that we do. And I think understanding that part of my job, part of the job of the agency head, is to be communicating out that information to people who may not be aware that the decisions they are making are impacting the work that we are doing or impacting other people in the state. And so it is trying to build those relationships, communicate out with people, help them understand the details of the work that is happening in libraries. I think a lot of people assume that when they hear the word library, they know what that means and they know what's happening. and sharing out the details of it, because every library is different, every team is different, and so we need to be just responsive to that and letting people know that about the work that we're doing and how we can assist them and how we can partner with them. I think that's what I've learned so far.
That's great. Where do you see the state library in the next 5 years?
Oh, that's a really great question. I would love to see, obviously, we'll be reopened. We will be in the next 5 years. That was sarcasm. We will be continuing on to support the legislature. We will be continuing to provide archives and public records. I think that we're seeing a move toward digital government to electronic information. And so having the tools and the team who are trained in order to continue on with that work, I think is important. I would love to see the continuing on of virtual programming like this, reaching an audience beyond just Hartford or beyond just Connecticut, to share the resources that we have. As one of the original colonies, there is so much history to this state, and we have a lot of people who are interested in that for genealogical research, for historic research. And so helping them to have access to those materials, I think, is important. We have a wonderful museum that we'll be returning people to and continuing to build on that. And one of the things that I've learned in just the conversations I've had with others here in the state is how much interest there is in partnering, in working together on some of these issues. None of us is going to be the one place that's the museum on this in Connecticut. I think that we are stronger together, we work better together. And how do we partner? How do we move forward in a group setting in a way that is benefiting everybody in Connecticut is really important. So those are, I think, some of the places we'll see the state library going.
Great. And you had mentioned the digitization of all of the materials. So it's a good lead in for my next question about providing service to the people of Connecticut and beyond. How do you use social media in your work? And this is for both of you.
Lizette, you want to go first?
Well, we participate with the state library's website. We put things up there. I personally don't do a lot of social media. As far as work, as far as the state archivist, it goes through either Robert or Christine Pitsley does a lot. And so, I mean, we provide her information. One of the things that happens every month is the National Archives hosts a archives hashtag party, and they set a theme, usually the first Friday of the month. So the one in April is going to be having to do with the theme of hats for, springtime and the, Easter bonnets and things like that. So we were having emails, okay, what kind of images and things do we have in our collection that relate to hats that we can put out there and share with the community. That's one thing to let them know what's in the collection. We've been talking about, suffragettes. They had their whole uniform and the big hats. That we have those images in our collection. We also have advertising cards from hat manufacturers from Danbury. So that would be something that, we might use and have some information on millinery factories here in Connecticut. So we can tie together history of manufacturing and this theme of hats. We're working on some blog posts that will go with our court records project that we'll be putting out there to set the stage on, what the project is, talk about slavery in Connecticut, talk about indigenous communities in Connecticut and how they interacted with the courts, because they're their own separate nation, but there's all kinds of intricacies there with the court system and how they were treated. So we do use it, but I personally am not on in official capacity with social media. I do Facebook myself, with family and friends, but I don't do it as the state archivist. So
We're living in a different world, right? Everything is out there and online. And Deborah, what do you think?
yeah.
I think that's a really great question. I've been very similar to Lizette. I'm on some of these accounts for myself personally, but I would say certainly from the standpoint of the state library and the archives, we want to continue out with that because I think that we've seen that that is how people like to interact with us. It's so easy to just watch an Instagram story, to like a photo, to make a comment on Facebook. And if that's where people are interested in interacting with us, then we should be in that space and we should be responsive to it. I'm in the early stages of thinking about my return to the world of social media because I think that as the state librarian, I'm not from Connecticut, and I'm very conscious of the fact that I am also having to get up to speed on the history of the state and what that entails in terms of my position. And I thought, well, I bought the 169 Club book where you can visit all of the different towns and it tells you what to do in them. And I have purchased some books about various different aspects of Connecticut history. And I was thinking about, I want to read these books. I want to get to be familiar with the history of Connecticut. And I was like, well, maybe people would be interested in going on that journey with me. And so I think what I'm probably going to be doing is I'll have a Facebook page, I'll have an Instagram page, Goodreads, and you can follow along with the state librarian as she's traveling around Connecticut or visiting museums or reading books about the history of Connecticut. It's not launched yet, but that I think is what I want to do. And I'm hopeful that people will be interested in it and you'll have a chance to tell me which museum I should visit next or which yarn shop or ice cream store is your favorite in your town as I come to visit. So hopefully that will be coming very soon. And I think it's a really fun way to interact with the public, to make the position of state librarian be a little more approachable. And it also helps keep me accountable because that way I love to check things off lists. So I think it's a good way to make it fun to go through that project too.
That does sound like a lot of fun and something I would love to follow you with. So thank you for sharing that. Sounds like a lot of fun. So what role do you both see the Connecticut State Library playing in the larger cultural heritage and museum landscape of Connecticut? And how might the library work with museums and cultural organizations moving forward?
I think that is absolutely a good question. I think Lizette and I have had a number of conversations about this because like I said, I think it is about partnership. It's not about every institution for itself or trying to be the one that is responsive to everything that people are asking for. There are so many museums, so many historical societies, libraries in this state that all have their own talents and interests and collections. And I think that if we band together, I think that, like I said, it's going to be a better path forward for all of us so that we are sharing those resources. We're not competing, partnerships, traveling collections. We have a traveling archivist who can come and consult with you on things. All of those different things are a really good way so that we can preserve the history of Connecticut together and move forward. So I think that's what I would say. And I'm sure Lizette has some ideas too.
Yeah, we, as state archivist, I chair the State Historical Records board here. It ties into the National Historic Publications and Records Commission. Originally, it was to review their grants that were submitted from Connecticut. That's changed, but we are able to get small grants to do whatever we want to do to help promote Connecticut archives and records. And so one of the things we've been doing with these grants that we get every 2 or so years, first of all, has been offering training to local historical societies in how to care for their archival records. They get a lot of training in museum artifacts and those types of materials, but they haven't gotten a lot of training on how to handle archival records. And so we've had some intro to archives courses that we've done. We've done webinars this last go around on digitization and how you set up a digitization program. What do you digitize? Because there's things that you have to do with the file to make it accessible into the future. You don't want to digitize absolutely everything just to digitize it. You have to be able to find the images afterwards. So, you know, how do you describe them? You know, what kind of metadata, which are the descriptors for the items you, the images you create. Our next go round, we're going to be, and we've also done regrants. I need to add that our last go round, we had regrants that we gave out 16 grants to 16 historical societies to have, as Deborah mentioned, the traveling archivist come out and help these institutions with small projects to, you know, better house, better access their archival records. And we're preparing our next grant. And so we're hoping, again, to reach out to underrepresented groups, again, to help them identify and preserve their material, their records. I see somebody's asked about the Traveling Archivist program in the chat. It just popped up. It is going on, but we're wrapping up one grant and preparing another. So it's probably going to be not until after January where we'll be advertising again for applicants to that Traveling Archivist program. But we will get that out to people when we are making those things happen again. So.
And that question came from Kathy. So I have a fun question actually related to females, and you know, I work for the Connecticut Women's Hall of Fame. I'm the education manager, so I love this question. Who are the female role models or mentors who have helped guide you or served as inspirational mentors in your professional career? Lizette, you want to start?
Okay, well, first off, I would have to say my mother. She strongly encouraged me to go to college, get a degree, live my life before settling down and getting married, because she did not finish her college. She went a couple of years and then got married and had all of us. She did try to go back, but with 5 small children, it doesn't work so well. You know, she had aspirations of being an astronaut before, you know, there were astronauts. So she was inspirational that way, to have a career. Both my parents were very open and welcoming people. As far as I grew up in a very white community. There weren't a lot of people of color, though there was a presence of Native Americans, because we were in northern Minnesota. But as far as any other groups, really there weren't. But my parents made sure that we, you know, knew the value of every human being. My mother welcomed a gay couple into our community in the 70s, and, you know, invited them and to, you know, social gatherings. And, you know, when one of the partners became ill, brought over casseroles and did all those Midwestern things that people do. We were traveling out on our vacation that we came out to the East Coast, and there was a civil rights march from the West Coast to the East Coast by Indigenous peoples, and they were camped in the same campground we were in. And my youngest brother, who would have been 8 or 9 at the time, was terrified because all he knew of Native Americans was what he saw in the movies on TV. And my mother went and took us down and asked if they would be willing to talk to us and talk about their life and their culture. And, you know, these were the things my parents did. So I think I had a good grounding for being into this profession from her. I had a history teacher who was very inspiring in high school, who I still communicate with. She's 96 years old, and started my love of history. Bev Naylor, who used to work here, she was in the history genealogy unit. She was also active in the union, but she was also one of the first African Americans to come work at the state library. So I heard all the stories of her integrating into the staff here, and some of the things that she had to deal with. And then finally, Eunice Abella, who's the former public records administrator here at the state library, who gave me opportunities. I had a small break in state service when my kids were little. Daycare was more expensive than our mortgage. And so I took a break, but she brought me back on small projects, kept me involved with the staff. And then when there was an opening, brought me back on the public records staff, which has been very good to have had that experience as well as archives experience for what I'm doing now. So I think those are the four key people, key women in my life that, I have to thank for getting me where I am.
That's wonderful, really wonderful. And Deborah, we'd love to hear from you too.
So absolutely. My mom was also very inspirational on that front. She was, in addition to being a principal, she was our history and social studies teacher. And so I had her as my teacher for a number of years. And she and my dad were always really wonderful about making sure that I had every book that I wanted to read, and encouraging that and supporting it, making sure I got the public library card so I could walk down to the bookmobile every other week. And our family vacations growing up were packing up the van and going camping and driving across the country. And we would visit every site and every museum and every historical site that we could get to. And so I grew up in a family that really valued that type of exploration, that type of education, and learning to appreciate, like Lizette was saying, different perspectives and hearing about what happened in the past. And, I would say I had, in addition, I had a really wonderful English teacher, Mrs. Ski, who just, again, encouraged the reading, encouraged me to continue expanding out. If she saw I was interested in one thing, well, have you read this book? Have you tried reading this? How about something else? In law school, obviously the librarian who let me know that this was a career path that I can go on. And then she connected me with Nancy Johnson, who was kind of a leader in law librarianship. She was known for being, her nickname was the Betty Crocker of legislative history. And she literally wrote the book that told people how to do this type of research well before there were electronic records. And so she was just incredibly inspirational in terms of, she was not a forceful personality. She was just a very strong, quiet personality who knew what she wanted. And one of the things that had the biggest impact on me was when I went to work for her, we had a number of people who started at the same time I did. Almost half of the professional library staff turned over at the same time. And she saw that as an opportunity to change the way that the library was viewed by the people that we worked with, by the way that we interacted with our peers. And she said, we are going to act like we are their peers. We are going to go forward and we're going to appear at events. We're going to be, we're going to make the small talk. We're going to be at all of these places where everybody else is. And I was talking earlier about how I was always very introverted. I was not somebody who wanted to be in front of a crowd. And I learned how to communicate with people. I learned how to make small talk. I learned how to listen to people and be present in where you were. And I saw how much of a change and an impact it can have when you put that effort into the work that you're doing. And it transformed the way that we were perceived. It transformed the way that we were asked questions and how we were brought in on projects. And I wouldn't be the librarian I am. I wouldn't be the person I am if I hadn't had that experience with her. And so every time somebody says, who was it that influenced you? I think of Nancy right away. And so it was an incredibly beneficial relationship. So.
Wonderful. That's wonderful. So at this point, I would love to hear some, I'm going to open it up for questions and answers from our friends on Zoom and on Facebook. So please write down your questions in the chat. Jenny on Facebook asked the question, will there be any future programs like the students who went to France? Will there be programs like that in the future?
Yes, so that one in particular, we're moving forward on step 2, which is bringing students from France here to Connecticut. We have a meeting about that next week. So that is one of the projects that is coming down. It was delayed because of COVID, but we do intend to see that project through and are looking forward to it.
Great, great. So I have a fun question. What was your favorite childhood book and why? Who wants to start, Lizette?
Well, yeah, as Christine posted this on Facebook leading up to this. My favorite, it was actually a series of books called The Happy Hollisters. It was a family of 5 children, and it was Pete, Pam, Holly, Sue, and Ricky, and they would solve mysteries in their little hometown. Or they went on vacation, and so we would play that. We'd act out the roles, and there was well, there was 4 of us at the time, and then my youngest brother was born, and we convinced my parents to name him Richard so we could have our own Ricky that went along with the family. So yeah, and I found out they're being republished. They weren't for a long time. But they're being republished, and there's a few titles I haven't read. Of course, I'm sure I'm going to find things in there because they were written during the 50s, 60s. I think the last 1969 was the last one that was published. And there's probably some things in there that are cringeworthy, but you know, it's still fun to go back and read those things. And then I heard Deborah also read the same series when she was growing up.
I did. I was going to say, I saw that post and I was so excited because I also read The Happy Hollisters, and I'm pretty sure that one of the few boxes that are still in my parents' basement are some of the original. I don't know if they're original, but I know that they are hardcover editions of some of the Happy Hollister books. So I'm going to get it. We're going to connect on that one. I posted about this or Christine posted about this on Facebook too, was I loved Anne of Green Gables. My mom bought me the set for Easter one year and I devoured it. It was an adventurous young woman who had a huge vocabulary and a huge imagination, and she went on all kinds of adventures, and I loved reading that. And it was the first, Ellen Montgomery was the first author that I said, I want to read every single thing that she has written. And I went out for years, and my allowance and any bookstore that I went to, I found every one of her books that I could. And for a while, I think I had every one that was in print. I need to double check because there may have been more produced. She put out a lot of short stories in particular. But I really enjoyed the learning about young women who were facing various different issues and concerns, and you know, early 20th century Canada. And so that was mine. Like, and I talked about how my parents would take us on these big family vacations. I was so into Anne of Green Gables that they took us to Prince Edward Island one summer. We saw the play, we went to Green Gables, all of those kinds of things. So again, it was just a way that they were supportive of our interests and obsessions. I'll use that word.
That's great. That's so wonderful. So I do have a question here from Chris for Deborah. Can you please give us an update on whether you or Dawn have had a conversation with anyone from the governor's office about his new COVID guidelines, including allowing 100% capacity in libraries in the state effective March 19th, which was the best week?
Yeah, it's a really great question. I know a number of people were surprised to kind of see that announcement go out. I have had a conversation with the governor's office, the chief of staff, as well as Commissioner Lehman in the DEC department. And one of the things that I think is important about that is it's still intended to be a flexible standard. It is not a mandate that libraries have to be open at 100%. Also, one of the things we talked about was how library capacities are different than maybe full capacity at a restaurant or a retail shop. And so we know that most libraries aren't aiming at 100% capacity, even when we're not social distancing. So I think that this is something that's up to the towns, the associations, the leadership of each library to make a decision. How comfortable are they with social distancing, with cleaning, with staffing numbers? They can open as much as they would like to, but they are not mandated to be open at 100%. And so if you have a question about a particular library, I would encourage you to reach out to that library. Unfortunately, not every library has been able to reopen at all. Some are still closed, some are at just curbside pickup, some are allowing people in. And so it really depends on your particular library, and just check with them and see what it is. And I also know that many of them put a lot of effort into their reopening plans and how they were going to approach that. And so they do have careful step-by-step plans in that area. So check with your local library.
Great. That's great. Well, I think I have maybe a time for one very quick question. What motivates you to succeed? Maybe just a few words. Deborah?
I think it's just the adventure of it all. I love learning. I love the opportunity to be curious and dabble in a lot of different things. And I enjoy that. And so I think the adventure of it.
Great. And Lizette?
Well, just the satisfaction that you get when you accomplish something, that, you put the effort into it and you have something to show for your effort. And I always, I found in life that, even when you don't succeed, it still moves you forward. You've learned something from it. My kids are in their 20s and early 30s. And, but I always told them, no matter what job you have, no matter how bad, awful it is, you're still going to learn a skill by doing it that you're going to find that you use later on in life. Yeah, just, you might accomplish something. It might not feel like or look like an accomplishment, but you've done something. And if you've failed, you've still accomplished something. So, because you tried.
That's wonderful. That's wonderful. So I think we're just about out of time. And I just want to say thank you, Lizette and Deborah. This has been such a pleasure to have this conversation with both of you. And I love, the answers that you shared. I'm really excited for the future. So at this point, I'm going to hand this back to Robert, so he can share a few words. But thank you again for a wonderful conversation.
Thank you, Liz. You've been a great moderator.
Yes, thank you.
Thank you.
Yes, thank you, Liz, and thanks to the Connecticut Women's Hall of Fame. Thank you for participating in our program today. I just want to stress to the audience, if you have questions that we did not or were not able to get to, we will take them down and we will try to get back to you as soon as possible. But again, we want to thank you all for being part of this wonderful conversation. And we thank you, and stay tuned for future programming at the Connecticut State Library in the future. Take care, everyone. Thank you.
Thank you, everybody.
Bye. Bye.